What's up, rockers?
Yeah, I'm Kaz.
And I'm Shay, and welcome to a super special edition of For the Record with Kaz and Shay. Don't adjust your sets. We got a third person with us. Kaz, who do we have with us?
We have the legendary Dan Siegel, otherwise known as Dancing Eagle.
Dancing Eagle.
Hey, dudes.
Why doesn't somebody give us a cool nickname like that?
Well,
Dancing Eagle.
Yeah, and you know what? You hit the nail on the head, man, because you have to have somebody give you a nickname.
Yeah.
You cannot come up with your own nickname.
Well, I don't know. I sort of just started calling myself Shay.
Yeah.
A few people call me Shay, but for this show, it sounded better than my whole last name.
Yeah.
He's Kaz. I'm Shay. I gave myself a nickname. People
Right.
can do it.
Remember the old legend of your name? Wasn't someone just drunken slur talking to you and it just came out as...
Yeah.
That-
Back when, like, before even voicemail, we had answering machines.
Yeah.
And the singer for the band that became the Black Supersuckers and another buddy of ours called me one night, left me a message. They were trying to get me to come out with them. I was already out, but when I got home, there was a message on the machine, and they were trying to say my name, but they couldn't. They were just too wasted to say my name, and then they realized it sounded like Dancing Eagle, so they just started like chanting that on the phone on the answering machine.
That's great. So this episode is real special for me because I wouldn't be in this spot right now if it wasn't for Dan and over here our sound guy from the day, David Fisher. But this is the reason I'm here is because they gave me my start in all of this stuff. And Dan was part of the band that, like, I would not miss a show back in the day. They started off as a band from Tucson, Arizona, originally as a 5-piece, and we'll get into some more of that later. But they were the band that I saw the most in my life, and ended up working with them, and still friends with all of them to this day. So it's just really neat to have you guys see the reason that I loved them so much. And Dan's going to talk about his upbringing, what brought them up to Seattle, and what it was like back in the day. We're going to have some fun stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Dan, when did you get into music? Did you live in a house that had lots of music all the time? I mean, how does that happen? When do you develop this passion for music?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had a piano at my house, but there wasn't like a musician in our family, per se. So I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. I saw some early shows as a kid, and I just gravitated towards it. I wanted to play drums. I saw a drummer, and I was like, oh, I want to play drums. And my dad goes, well, we own a clarinet, because I played clarinet in high school. And so you're going to have to try clarinet first, which I did for 9 weeks. But I self-sabotaged, and before I knew it, I was able to play drums. So, I don't know. It's just sort of a self-interest. It wasn't like handed to me from a family member.
Did they make you play on pots and pans and pillows first, or they just here's a drum set? How did you get the first drum set?
I think somebody was just advertising a drum set in the newspaper, in Tucson back then. It wasn't like you went to Craigslist, right? So somebody was selling one, and it was a hodgepodge of stuff, and I think part of it was Ludwig, but other parts were just spray painted to look like Ludwig, and so it was just cheap secondhand, things. So they didn't venture out and buy me a really expensive drum set to start, but I got that, and then convinced them after a little bit of time to get me something that was worthwhile. My parents were super supportive, from the get-go, really.
And then would they play music? Did they I had a very musical household. Kaz did too. Lots of records playing.
Yeah.
Did you have lots of music throughout the house, or is this all on your own? You just manifested this?
No, we definitely had music. I mean, my early memories of listening to music would be and like a 1972 Pontiac, listening to Creedence Clearwater and Johnny Cash and the Beatles, Rubber Soul and that sort of stuff. And so there was definitely music around at all times. Not that they weren't musicians, but they loved music. And so we listened to a lot of great stuff that I listen to a lot of that still today. Right?
Yeah.
And then so you got the drum thing down, you make it through school, and then you're in Santa Rita High School.
How do you know?
There's a song off the
yeah.
Evil Powers of Rock and Roll,
Yeah.
which I was playing this morning to get excited for this interview.
Listen to it on the way up. Yes.
Okay, right on.
Pump up music.
And where you met your bandmates, which were inevitably started off as the Black Supersuckers, but how did you guys all get to know each other, and then to start a band? Because you were also a great athlete. had Ron's old yearbooks at the house and flipping through them. I saw you were a pretty good swimmer.
Yeah. Well,
You still have a body of a swimmer.
Oh, thank you, John.
He got the
We'll
look.
show you more later. Show you more later. So, Cass, I think to fill in the story a little bit more for you, like there's only one Supersucker that I met at high school. Okay. Like everybody else I met prior to high school. And Eddie and I went to the same elementary school. So I've known Eddie since the 4th grade. Dan Bolton went to the same middle school as we did, junior high. Wouldn't call it middle school back then, but junior high, and so did Eric Martin, and then I met Ron in high school. So Ron's the only one who didn't go like elementary or our junior high school. We met him in high school. So at Santa Rita, Ron is the one member of the band that I met.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you remember those first practices as a band when you finally said who said let's form a band?
Well, it's always progressive. Like so, Eddie and I were going to start a band in like maybe very early high school, and but we never really got it launched. And then Eddie started playing in like heavy metal cover bands. That was like that was what he thought was his entree into playing music and rock and roll was like heavy metal cover bands. So he was doing that, and then it wasn't until right after high school that he started a band, that was like a glam rock band that was playing original music. And
would that be a Ty Pink?
Mm-hmm.
Was it?
Yeah, it's called Ty Pink.
I had the demos somewhere.
Yeah.
Or on my iPod.
Yeah.
Not like an original, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's there's some interesting things there still, for sure. So he started that band with Eric, who was the singer, the singer in Ty Pink, and then the singer in the Black Supersuckers, and then another friend of ours from high school, whose name is Vaughn Cromwell, and they had this glam rock band that was happening. And one day, this is like shortly after high school, like maybe 2-3 months after high school, I was going to college at the University of Arizona, and they called me and they said, "Hey, we have studio time booked. And our drummer just no-showed on us. Like, he's just not going to come." And they called me up and said, "Can you do this?" And I was like, yeah, well, I mean, like they had a demo tape or whatever that they could send me the demo tape. And I heard that, and I was like, yeah, I'll come down and do this. And so we did these 2 songs, which I still have copies of. You might have the same stuff as well.
Right.
And so I did those 2 songs, and after we did that recording, they're like, "Okay, hey, you want to join the band?" Uh-huh. So I did. So it's like, I mean, this whole story, it's like it's interwoven and, things moving and different people.
Right.
But we did that for a while. So Eric and Eddie and I were in this band, and we had another guitar player in that band, Billy, and we had and then Vaughn, and Eddie was just on bass and singing backups. And we did that for a couple of years and had certainly had some local scene success, and the shows were great, and we were like trying to get on a major label, and the same A&R guy who signed Soundgarden was scouting our band and that sort of thing. But then like inner band personalities and clashes started to kind of boil over, and that band just kind of blew up, and Eddie and the guitar player were going to move to LA, and Eric and I were like, okay, great, we're going to stay here and we're going to start a new band. And then Eddie didn't end up moving to LA, and he started a band with Dan Bolton, and it's just kind of,
It meshed together eventually.
Yeah, finally, we decided, okay, well, Bolton and Eddie and Ron and I were like, all right. I mean, Bolton and Eddie and Eric and I, not Ron, were like, okay, well, let's just sort of join forces here and start a band, and that became the Black Supersuckers. So we were trying to decide, okay, who's the other guitar player. And Ron was in Ty Pink for a little while, briefly. My friend, my buddy Vaughn left the band, and Ron took his place in the band. But the sad part of that story is that Ron, Ron really wanted to be in this band, and at the end of the day, Eric and Eddie both were like, you know what, Ron just doesn't have, he didn't have it. Like he just, whether it's like, oh, Ron's hair isn't cool enough or whatever, like Ron just was like aspiring to be as awesome as he became,
right?
But he wasn't there yet for those guys, and they kicked him out of the band.
Wow.
So anyway, we're talking about like guitar players for for the Supersuckers, and Eric and I have a really good friend. His name's Cliff Taylor, and Cliff was a Tucson guy, great guitar player, he was living in L.A. at the time. Actually, I think road tour managing Johnny Thunders.
Ooh.
And he was like, but I'm going to move back to Tucson. And we're like, great, you need to join the Black Supersuckers. And he just wasn't moving back fast enough. And so we had Ron come over to practice with us, and it just clicked. So
It worked out that second time. Made
Yeah,
those
second time.
adjustments, or-
I know. It's like,
Isn't
yeah.
there an interesting name of how you came up with the name, the Black Supersuckers?
Well, so this happens to a lot of bands and a lot of artists, I think. Like we book a show, or somebody asks us to play a party or whatever it is, and we didn't have a name. We were just in the, we had all moved into a band house, and we were like every night just practicing after work. And so we have this show come up, and we're like, we don't have a name. So at the end of the night, one night, and I can describe the practices used to be like we all get home from work, we fill the fridge with beer, and then in the living room it gets dark. We turn on a strobe light, and while we practice, we finish all the beer in the fridge and all the weed on the table, and the whole night. I mean, we're talking about like 4 hours of strobe light. So we sit down after that, and we're like, we need a name. And Eric just started thumbing through like one of the the porn mags on the coffee table, and at the back of it, it had an ad for a video you could order called the Black Supersuckers. He's like, how about this? We thought for sure we'll use this once. We're not going to keep this, except for we're lazy, and so it stuck.
That is a great origin story. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And then so the parties were good. You guys were doing good down in Tucson. Did you get almost a little too big for Tucson? Kind of decide, let's try someplace different.
Yeah, I think really the Black Supersuckers were really kind of conceived of this idea that we weren't going to stay in Tucson. Because it's small. It's small market, and it's really hard to get attention.
Right.
Or like, okay, because back then you're like, oh, we've got to be on a major label. You're not going to go anywhere if you're not on a major label.
And kind of right around that time, LA was the place or whatnot.
Yeah.
Right before the Seattle bubble would
Yeah.
soon to be. So
Yeah.
you guys were right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
then you guys made a band decision.
Well, so I think we used to go to LA like for fun, and like we'd go out and see shows out there, and so we had exposure to that scene. Like there were cool pop-up things that happened in LA. There was a venue that moved around called Scream. There was the Cat House, like the Faster Pussycats guys had that Cat House. So we just felt like it just really wasn't what we wanted to do. Like it just was a little phony and overblown and whatever. So we were considering other places. Like, okay, well, if we know we can't do it here, so where should it be? And we were considering Memphis and Nashville and New Orleans, and like just sort of romanticizing what that could look like. And then our friend of ours from Phoenix, Danny Bland, was like, he had moved here to Seattle a year prior. He's like, you need to come to Seattle. I mean, there's a lot of clubs you can play, and you can wear your leather jacket in the summertime. And we're like, what? Okay, we're going to Seattle. And so we decided we're going to go to Seattle, and making plans. So like the Black Supersuckers started Thanksgiving 1988, and we were like, Eddie and Bolton and I moved up first, and we were on the road by 1st of May, not 89, to come here.
Right. So my first time ever seeing you guys was obviously after the Eric Martin era, but it was a Sub Pop Lame Fest.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, ever since I saw that one show with you guys, I would go look for the Rocket to come out. Where are they playing at?
Yeah.
And I would see you guys at all the places like the Color Box, and you name whatever, the Phoenix, anywhere in Seattle. It would be. I would not miss any of your guys' shows. They even go out to Bremerton when you guys were doing the tours with the Rev and the Butthole Surfers, whatever. I would not miss a show. But
yeah, it's awesome.
Before that had happened, there was a switch in the band dynamics. Did you want to talk a little about that?
Before which part happened?
With the classic lineup that I knew, with Eric's departure.
Yeah. Or talk about Eric's departure?
Yeah.
Well, we moved here, and we, like I said, Eddie and Dan and I moved here in '89. We got here on the anniversary of Mount St. Helens, blowing its top. It was like May 18th.
1980.
And we didn't have, we thought we had a place to land and kind of crash with Danny, and he had his girlfriend was like, no, you're not fucking, they're not coming to our apartment. So
why wouldn't anybody want you guys
I
living
know.
with them?
So I remember,
Sweethearts.
like, we pull into Seattle, and none of us had ever been here. Like, and it was, like, foreign to us. We're used to dry swirl cactuses, and, like, it was dumping rain and green everywhere and big city. And we pull over in, like, Montlake, and we get on the payphone, and we call Danny, and he breaks the news, like, no, you can't come to my place. And we're like, what the fuck are we going to do? And but he goes, but I've got some other friends, and they got a place at their house you can stay. And they had a house in Wallingford. So while we were looking for a house to rent, we just crashed on their floor for like a month and a half. And then finally found a place to live up in Greenwood off of Aurora. And then Ron and Eric ended up moving up that summer, so like in the middle of the summer. And that happened for about a year. We were here, like, focused on playing shows and practicing in our basement. And it was a pretty magical time, and it was a wild experience. It had its ups and it had its downs. Right. You know what I mean? Like Seattle had a lot of it had a lot of potholes. I mean, like, places for a young rocker to holes to fall into.
Yep.
And so we did, like a lot of us did, and made some bad choices and whatnot. But after about a year, it became really clear that Eric was, he had put this romanticism of drugs and that lifestyle ahead of, like being committed to being, to creating music and being a rocker. I love him. I miss him dearly. He ended up dying like in '94 of an overdose, right? But we had to part ways with him. We just didn't have, and I'll say this, like, because we didn't have the tools to help him.
Right.
We were just too young.
And it was a little different time back then, too, and so that's where Eddie slides over and takes the duties as a singer, and you guys then become the Supersuckers.
Yeah. I mean, there was a discussion, like, about what to do, and we decided to do that, but and we figured it like, we're okay, we think this might work, but now the sound was completely different. Eric brought something else, like, to what we were doing that was, I mean, like, if you were be honest about it, like, more soulful. Right. I mean, Eric was really soulful guy, really loved, the Stones and the Faces and those things. And, with him in the band, we were much more like there was much more of a tendency to feel a little bit more like the Black Crowes than Motorhead. With him. So it changed a lot, and you can hear it. Like, if you listen to the songs all sound the same, that's what the band sounded like right after Eric left. And which is great, it's all good. But there was also, like, some insecurity in that too, like, for Eddie.
Right.
And there was a time where, like, right around that period where Eddie was like, I think I'm going to quit doing this and move to San Francisco and just play bass for the Dwarfs.
Yeah.
And so we were like, and it was like, me and Bolton kind of had to be okay with that. It ended up not happening, but.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, when I first saw you, that was like right at the Smoke of Hell era.
Yeah.
And I saw you on a big showcase, a Sub Pop showcase, and you guys were the only band, like I said, that stuck out that was different than what was going on here.
Yeah.
You guys were fast. It was like Motorhead.
Yeah.
It blew me away that I would not miss any of your shows for years in this area. Then it would come out Lamano Cornuda, another album would come out, and then, Smoke of Hell. I mean, so during that era too, your live shows were second to none of any band I'd see.
Oh.
Every time you would go to a Supersuckers show, it would be a surprise for the fan, whether you guys would do a cover of Thin Lizzy's Cowboy Song or you playing the bass with the drumsticks, everything. It was always just such excitement watching your guys' show.
Yeah,
How did you
thanks.
guys come up with all of that? I mean, you guys probably still rehearse nonstop and you guys had so much fun doing it.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun. I mean, that's just what we lived and breathed. And like if I were to comment on your question or your point about sounding different, we were different when we moved here. It was like we did not, we weren't bubbling up through what was happening in the Seattle scene and the grunge movement and all of that. And there was I guess sort of a darkness that comes with that, right?
Right.
And even with Eric, we were really more like, hey, let's have a good fucking time. It's like we're, really kind of a party band, and so like we got to town, like we played the Coca Sub Pop show with Mudhoney and Nirvana and and Gore and Tad and all these bands, and we were definitely not like them, but everybody in Seattle was extremely welcoming. Like, you know, we were welcome to this scene, and I think a lot of that maybe comes from the fact that we got here before there was an influx of people going, oh, I see that you can become popular if you move to Seattle. We came, again, remember, why did I move to Seattle? You remember?
You love the Space Needle.
I could wear
the leather jacket in the summer.
summertime,
Yes.
exactly. So, you know, there was all those, and then there became bands coming from all over the place that wanted to come here because they thought that they'd get attention and get signed and yada, yada, whatever. But people were really welcoming here, and we stood out, and we were different. But I think the way that we approach what we do was that it should be a show, and it should be fun, and we also want to mock all the cliche stuff, because we grew up on arena rock and roll on the east side of Tucson, Arizona. And so the shows we saw, like, you know, like Kelsie over here is wearing a Rat shirt, right? Those were the shows that were happening for us. We, you know, until we got out of high school and started living downtown Tucson, and then we'd see punk bands. I mean, I saw Johnny Thunders in 1986 at a steakhouse, like in the bar of a steakhouse with 100 people. And it was like, oh, I see.
I'm jealous.
So now I saw the Chili Peppers in the same room, like when the Chili Peppers were actually kind of interesting to see, you know.
Right.
But that's when we got exposed to even like underground indie punk, whatever, and glam, like, you know, through a guy like Johnny Thunders. But other than that, it was arena rock. Throw your guitar in the air and shake your ass, and we loved making fun of that and going, it's so ridiculous, you know. And that made us, I think, a good fit in Seattle, because it was like, oh, what's happening in LA is bullshit, and so we want to be authentic, and we were authentic, but using some of that stuff and making fun of it.
And you guys succeeded. I mean, like I say, your shows were always different, and they were always like quite the entertainment, you know? And that's what made it so fun. That's why I've seen you hundreds of times, and then
I love you, Cass.
I love you too.
Yeah, Cass was quite the legend. Like, oh man, Cass is working for the Supersuckers. It was really cool. So, what were the early tours? Who would you go out with, and what were shows like?
Well, the earliest of early tours was the first thing we did was we went on tour Gas Huffer down the West Coast, and those guys, like with Tom Price in that band, it was like, oh wow, I mean, we're going to really learn something. And Tom's a seasoned veteran, you know. And so that was amazing, you know, and we did that run from here down to, I think went down the West Coast to Tucson and back, and played a whole number of shows, and we got caught up like right in the middle of the Rodney King riots.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we were supposed to play downtown LA the night that the riots broke out, and we're watching, we're all sitting at this house in Hollywood going, what the fuck is going on? And we're like, we have to go downtown and play a show, and I don't think we should do that. And Tom Price is like, we're gonna go play that damn show. And we're like, oh, okay. So we did. And it was a crazy experience. Of course, no one went to the show. It was just the bartenders and the opening band. Pop Defect played that show with us. So it was like a really kind of crazy experience, but a successful tour. And then the next tour I think we did was with the Dwarves across Canada. So you guys can imagine what that experience might have been like. And then we went to Europe with the Reverend Horton Heat and the Dwarves and the Suckers all on one bus. And so it's just, you can tell it's progressively getting crazier, right? Like more insanity ensues. Yeah,
and then, you know, speaking of the insanity, like his song Fisticuffs deals with that. David has told me many stories.
Yeah.
I'd always pick Dave's brain on. It's just like, and Dave would tell me like fun stories, like Ron was always the one that they beat up first when we'd get in big fights and stuff. But you guys like had your share of fisticuffs from
So
shows.
with that swimmer's body, did that get you ready for some fisticuffs? Were you a good scrapper in the bar fights? What were those like?
Well, when we moved to Seattle, like I said, there were some pitfalls. I was drinking a lot, and that led to some of these fisticuffs. So at one point I had to kind of I really took a vow against violence. I was beating people up when I really shouldn't have been. Sometimes when I should have been, but other times not so much. But most of the time it was somebody like Eddie or Bolton getting into trouble. I mean, remember one night at the Magic Stick in Detroit where, and Eddie didn't actually get himself into trouble in this situation. Somebody thought he was in the Dwarves and they were going to kick his ass back in the parking lot behind the venue. And so I had to beat them away with a cymbal stand. But I don't know, like, you know, the thing with Bolton, and like, you know, there's that's the classic story, right? I think it was at Sudsy's in Cincinnati, but I wasn't actually there when it happened. But it is a great story. Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny too. Like, I just remember a few years ago, Mark, when I was working for Mark Lanigan, he played a show up on Vashon, and Ron came out, and at the end of the show, Ron just looks at Mark. He goes, "Do you remember me? You hung me from a balcony because you thought I was dating like one of your girlfriends." And I'm looking at Ron like, "You never told me this."
Yeah.
But back in the days, it sounded, you know, and then the living arrangement says you guys were here when there was like a Zeke house with you guys, and all the bands kind of, you had a good brotherhood of bands with Mudhoney and Zeke and you guys.
Absolutely. And like, you know, so in Seattle, there was these bands that we hung out with all the time, whether it was Gas Huffer or Mudhoney and Zeke, and just bands that we loved. And then all the bands that we would tour with that then became part of the family, the New Bomb Turks, like specifically, or Zen Gorilla. I'll forget a Nashville Pussy, or like these bands that were of a similar, like they're just running all in the same circles. And so we loved touring with those guys. But I think that, you know, there's so many stories. It's like it's hard to remember them. That's why, like, you know, hanging out with you and hanging out with Dave, or, you know, like, it's easier to remember them, like when someone else has like a piece of the story, like, oh, shit.
Right.
Yeah.
The clarity kicks in a little more.
I remember that, and then it kind of gets filled out because nobody remembers the whole thing or whatever, but together, you know, like together you do.
Yeah, back in the day with the shows that you guys were playing, another cool thing about it was, though, you just wouldn't see the Supersuckers. You would see a killer opening act. Like, I could see Tenderloin, I could see the Upper Crust.
Yeah.
I mean, so many great bands, the Streetwalking Cheetahs, on, and that was, those were the heydays, man. It was great.
Yeah.
And then, not shortly after that, you guys came out. Must Have Been High came out. I remember picking it up at the store, putting it in, waiting for it to rock, and it started off with like the guitar, and but I enjoyed it. I was like, wow, because you guys knew what you were doing. When I was listening to it, I was like, wow, and it was just different from what a lot of bands up here were doing, or whatever you want to think of doing.
Right.
How did that all come to fruition?
Well, I think probably it starts with the fact that, like I was saying, like, you know, I grew up listening to Johnny Cash and Willie and Waylon and Creedence, and so from very early on, and that was true for all of us, and from very early on, there was an aspect of us playing acoustic music and songs, and we'd go out to street fairs and we'd busk for enough change to buy a whole shit ton of beer and a few avocados for guacamole, and so that was just part of what we also did. And so Must Have Been High was something we had wanted to do for a while. And on that last, like, we owed Sub Pop one more record, you know, and decided to do it with that record. And I think, you know, we got lucky. Like, one of the things that's important is like who you meet and the connections you make and the influences you can draw on, because like being popular in Austin. And we were popular in Austin very early on. We toured with Mudhoney there, and from that point, like, we went through there once, and from that point on, Austin was a really great market for us. And so we met Jesse Dayton, and we met Randall Jamail, who produced that record, and they made it possible, like to take what we thought we wanted to do and help us actually get there. Right. And Jesse, like Eddie and I flew down to do pre-production and songwriting with Jesse first, actually, I think, if I remember correctly, we might have actually done that in Houston. And so the songs were written for that record with their help. And it helped us, you know, like I said, Tom Price helped us understand how to tour. Jesse and Randall helped us understand how to make a record like that.
Right. One of the greatest albums. Your biggest seller, right? Must Have Been High?
Oh, hell if I know.
Yeah, I think so. But
you know, I don't know.
But it seemed like, you know, no one was doing that at the time that I can remember from what I was listening to, and it seemed like you guys kind of set a trend. Now all of a sudden you're doing a country tour with like Jesse Dayton and stuff, and it's like that's where you really see some really good players come out. You know, like you see Alan Terhune play on like Pedal Steel, or see Jesse Dayton up there, and it's just really cool how all that evolved. Where the point where you guys are on the Tonight Show with Willie Nelson. You guys are playing his 4th of July picnics and stuff like that. And that was a great little, friendship you guys made with that whole community down in Austin.
Yeah. I mean, I give Danny Bland gets like so much credit for that because he was really one that helped make those connections in the way that he did, and the connection to like with Randall, and then Randall through to Willie and then Danny, putting together the concept for the Twisted Willie record. It was a cool nether sort of ecosystem or whatever of musicians and a style that was great to be introduced to. And then I think alt country was really starting to bubble up at that time, and Wilco was in early stages, or even Uncle Tupelo and then into Wilco,
right.
So it was great. I mean, I think it gave us a way to just expand what we could do and where we could play or what we could be. And I think also it's a longevity piece. Like obviously I'm not doing that anymore, but that style, there's a longevity there that you can't get playing loud, fast, snotty rock and roll.
Agree.
Unless you're Lemmy.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So
no one did it better.
Of all the songs that you recorded with the Supersuckers, do you have a personal favorite, like a song that you just loved to play and it never got old and it was just like you looked forward to playing that? Or is there all the songs? Was there one that really stood out?
You want to name a favorite child? Is that what you're asking for?
I mean, it's obviously it's Noah.
That's like,
yeah. There's so many of them. I mean, there was one song that I really loved playing that we didn't get to play after a while.
Okay.
It was verboten to play this song, right? Like, so you will never hear it.
Oh.
Although you might hear it soon. There's a song on, it must be on Lamano called She's My Bitch. Uh-huh. And that's a fun song. Now, it's not PC, although it kind of should be, but it still can't be. The message of the song,
right.
whatever. But great song. So maybe it needs a lyrical change there, or title change. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was a fun song to play. There's a lot of songs actually on that record. 17 Poles is a really fun song to play.
that was how you find your party spot. You drive out and then count 17 poles and then take a...
Yeah, our party spot in the desert was called 17 Poles. So in high school,
Right.
you'd be on Broadway Boulevard, and you'd drive east, and once you passed Houghton, you count 17 telephone poles, you pull off into the desert, and then before you know it was Dazed and Confused.
That's how it was like out here, but we had the rain to deal with in high school. It was all outside parties back in the day. So that's great. So it's, like I said, this is about when I started kind of meeting you guys and stuff, and and it was like I said, I'm forever in debt to all you guys just for giving me this chance to be around like all these lifelong people, and it's really cool to see your son Noah's over there sitting waiting for his photo shoot when we're done. But it's just really neat to hear like the perspective of you and I had once talked about, you had an idea of like it'd be fun to make a movie of your guys' move up here from Arizona, and you were telling me some of the stories about Bolton just doing donuts in the front yard in the vehicle, and just like too many stories to tell, and it's just there are two it's kind of too many stories to tell, and I think that it's kind of crazy. I did have that thought, like I was like, it's like a thing that like Dazed and Confused, it's just like this movie just lasts for 24 hours, like 24-hour period that you're capturing, right,
of a band living in a band house like we did, and it was insane. Like we would throw crazy disco parties at our house to pay the rent, and people would show up and they'd all throw $5 in the jar, and we'd literally pay our rent that way. And I mean, granted, rent was $300.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But they were crazy times. We all living in this house, and Bolton would get up every morning. He worked at an Italian deli, and our backyard was kind of like a little bit of a dirt parking lot. He would park his van back there, and every morning he'd do donuts, he'd blast his stereo, and then he'd tear off to work. And that's how I woke up for a year.
You go figure, he's a truck driver now. It's just fitting.
Totally fitting, absolutely.
And
Bolton loves to drive.
Yeah, and you're down in Austin, Texas now. All the band has since dispersed from this area,
Yeah.
But you're still involved in the music, with Noah and stuff. And unfortunately, we lost our good friend Ron Heathman a few years ago also, which was kind of very hard. And so, like, a lot of what you've been through, you look at, like, a lot of this people from Seattle back in the days that have since passed on, but it's, you kind of like the lucky one, or you just kind of knew when it was time.
For me personally?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that being in a band that was doing what we're doing, touring 9 months a year and living hard and living fast, man, that's a lot of fun at 27, 28, 24, whatever you want to call it. But at 36, when I stopped, it was like, oh, I see, I just, the way that I live my life, I want to see sort of incremental improvement, or hey, that's something cool and new to do. And I felt like that had stopped, you know? So I don't know if I'm not the lucky one. I mean, it's just sort of okay, I was at a crossroads, and I made a decision to go right as opposed to left. And that's I'm not passing judgment on anybody. It's your personal choice to make, you know?
Right.
But it just became clear, Noah was a year and a half old when I stopped playing, full time, and it just made sense. I have a son, he's a year and a half old, and I'm gonna leave 9 months a year. It made it really hard, and so I just was yeah, this isn't the right thing to do. Music should not feel like a job; it should feel like a passion.
Right.
And I think that I mean, at the end, I was I could only listen. I'd get in my car and I could only listen to sports talk or NPR. Yeah. And I was okay, I can't even listen to music anymore right now. It's just kind of I've hit a point of jadedness that I don't want.
Right.
So so I stepped back, and I think it was the timing was good. It was the right thing for me to do.
Right. It's turned out great for you. It's cool seeing Noah do what you do, and you can kind of coach him along the way, and and I'm sure he asks you the same questions,
Yeah.
And it's really neat to see that you've become pretty successful after the rock and roll tenure that you did with the Supersuckers.
Yeah.
John's got 5 questions he wants to give you. This is how we end our
5 questions with Kaz and Shay. Are you ready for these? These are hard hitting.
They are. I had a
questions.
preview of the questions, so I'll tell you guys that I'm going to give it my best shot. But
Okay.
no promise of quality on the answers.
There
Okay.
are no wrong answers.
All right.
What's the best concert you've ever been to?
This is another one of those things. Okay, so I was thinking about this to name the best concert I've ever been to. So I told you guys I saw Johnny Thunders in a steakhouse, with 100 people, right?
It, instantly got hungry.
Yeah.
I want a steak. Dave, steaks all around.
I saw, I toured with the Ramones for 6 nights. I toured with Motorhead. I saw. We flew down and saw Tom Waits at the Wiltern in Hollywood. It's how do you pick your favorite concerts? It's just too many great things. I mean, they're all there. I think that as opposed to my favorite one, it's just all these great experiences and recollections of seeing amazing shows, and but I mean, being side stage watching the Ramones, I don't know how you beat that, right? So if you wanted to call it, I guess it would be it'd be that one.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Your house is on fire. What's the one record you run back in to save?
Noah's going to love my answer to this one.
Okay.
All right. So I can replace every record in my collection, I think, except for my own band's records because they're out of print. So the question is, Kaz just called me the other day and asked for an original, record of the Supersuckers. So
smoke a hell.
Yeah. So I got to probably grab one of those, but if, because I can't get them again. But I would tell you that the record I probably think about that I put on the turntable the most is Marquee Moon by Television. And so if I had to say, okay, there is no Supersuckers records, they don't exist, then I'm grabbing probably Marquee Moon.
Awesome. Fill in the blank. People would be surprised that I listen to
Edith Piaf.
love it.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of jazz. So I listen to a lot of Django. I listen to a lot. Yep.
The greatest guitarist ever, possibly.
Could be. I just love it. So I listen to a lot of jazz. So, but Edith Piaf is kind of a name. I love that. I love her stuff. People probably wouldn't think I listen to it.
Yeah, there's a scene at the end of Saving Private Ryan when they're sitting around waiting for that last attack by the Germans, and that Edith Piaf record's playing.
Yeah,
beautiful.
I haven't seen that in a long time.
You should watch it. Let's all watch it.
It's so good you can only watch that
right
movie
after this.
once.
Right after this.
It's so good. You can only take it once.
You've won the lottery.
Yeah.
Who's playing your retirement/celebration party when money is no object?
Does it have to be living?
that would.
You don't think so? Kelsie
Well,
says no, not
if
only
you've got
living.
money, maybe they've frozen their heads. and
Okay,
you can
good.
I don't know.
Cryogenics?
Yes.
Okay, well, then you guys have to know it's Bon Scott era AC/DC.
Oh, yeah.
Badass.
I never saw Bon Scott, so it'd have to be.
Well, you're way too young to see Bon Scott live.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
I know.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah.
Okay. If Lemmy I can't even say that. Let's try it again. If Lemmy greets you at the pearly gates, what's he say to you?
I don't know, like welcome to the rainbow? I don't know.
Welcome to the rainbow. Okay.
Something like that, maybe? Is that's the fifth one?
That's the fifth
was.
one. Yeah.
Wow, that was simple.
know.
How'd I score?
Well, I thought there would be something cool from the Motorhead tour that maybe a story of your interaction with Lemmy at one point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, right. Yeah, hanging out with those guys was a lot of fun. Lemmy was like, he was a bit of a cranky rock and roller.
Curmudgeon.
He was a bit of a curmudgeon. I mean, it was good. Like we had fun did have fun with him and had fun, but and I don't know. Have you ever heard the story of Eddie and Lemmy in an argument?
Yes. Was it something about Lemmy saying that you guys sucked or something? Or?
No, I think it was really about like maybe even the space on the stage. I don't know.
No, I don't remember that.
I mean, it got a finger pointing thing. Oh, thank you, Dave. Thanks from the gallery.
Yeah.
So,
gotta do an episode
and they
with
didn't.
just
Why didn't they
Dave.
play it? I forgot why they didn't play.
Hey, why don't we just?
Monitors didn't get loud enough.
Are we going to bring Dave on? Should we pause this? You don't want to come on?
No. The monitors didn't get loud enough,
Monitors weren't loud enough.
Right.
but Lemmy was sick.
Got it. Lemmy was a little sick, I see, but the monitors weren't loud enough. That's right. So Lemmy got cranky because we decided to play the show. We're like, we didn't miss shows. Like there was no time that we missed shows. So I only ever missed one Supersucker show in my entire time. Like 15 years of Supersuckers, I missed one show, and we're playing nonstop 9 months a year. But I'd play if I had the flu. I was thrown up on the side of the stage. I'd still play, and that's how we did it. Like we always played the show. I missed the show because my grandmother had passed away, so I had to fly out of town to go to a funeral. But they didn't want to play Philly, and we're like, "Fuck it, we're playing." And he got pissed because he was like, "Yo, American asses," because I guess he felt like we showed him up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Were you surprised he passed? I think everyone thought he was going to live forever.
I guess we thought he was going to live forever, but he couldn't play. Like he can't. I think in Austin, he came out to do one of his final shows and had to walk off after like a few songs. So it was not like.
And wasn't that the weird daylight show that they played also? Wasn't it during the day? It wasn't it. They played it towards the end. They played like a show during the day as opposed to at night.
Huh.
It was.
Yeah. Not the Austin show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, the Austin show I think was the emos.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Bummer, but a legend indeed. And how cool that you got to
Absolutely.
do some shows with like them and the Ramones. I mean,
For sure.
you can never have that taken away from you.
No.
No,
those memories are amazing. Like sitting on our tour bus shooting the shit with Joey Ramone, and it's a memory you cannot.
And we're hoping like Kelsie, our awesome editor here. I know just seeing like old photos, like we see the fun one with Dave and Ron, and you guys playing cards backstage with White Zombie and the Ramones and stuff like that. Yeah. And hopefully if you can round up or scan any of those, we can add these into the episodes.
Yeah,
That would
I've got
be
a
great.
lot of cool stuff I can share.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, I think that is it. That's our wrap up. We're just
Thank
right
you
on,
enough
guys.
for coming on.
No, it's been
We
a pleasure.
should thank the fine folks at the Hotel Albatross.
and thank you,
shower.
Drew.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dave
What
Fisher.
a nice place to shoot a show. Thanks, Dave Fisher over there, and Noah over there.
Noah's getting his
Kelsie.
photo shoot next by me, so.
Right on.
You have
The next
a
generation
pretty
of
nice
rock and roll.
family.
Oh, thank you,
You
buddy.
got a lovely wife, 2 lovely kids. You made out good.
I did okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this has been great.
And like I say, I'm always just thankful to have you guys around me and just
Yeah.
for this opportunity. And it's been great that we've been able to carry this on for
sure.
20 some odd years. So.
Right on. Well, you guys are doing a great job with this.
All
I
right.
like checking it out.
Oh, good. Well, this will be a fun one. You're going to look really good on it.
Oh, thanks, man.
The lighting is awesome. Okay, well, that's it for us.
right.
I'm Kaz.
And I'm Shane. Thanks
Later,
for
guys.
watching this awesome episode of For the Record with Kaz and Shane. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.